This week, it's 5G Whizz with super fast connections, connected cows, and also the end of the world.
Whenever you're out and about, your mobile phone communicates with the rest of the world through these. Calls, messages and data are sent from masts like this to hundreds of phones within a few kilometers, and each of those phones send calls and data back again. It's a lot of work for one mast to do, and it kind of explains why if there are too many phones in any one area, things start to slow down. But it won't always be like this.
Our next mobile network will be the 5th generation, called 5G, and it'll be very different to what's come before.
1G was about the analog phone, allowing us to make calls to one another. 2G allowed us to do things like send SMS text messages and do voice recording. 3G was about the promise of the smartphone, allowing us to access digital broadband services. And 4G, which is what we've had since 2009, allowed us to do all of those first three things, but just faster. 5G is like going from Earth to Mars. It's not a faster world, it's a different world. It's going to be a world that's going to be connected, in which machines will be talking to each other and talking to you.
And to achieve that, we're going to have lots and lots of antennae everywhere. On lampposts, buildings, you name it, it's going to have an antenna on it. And that's because there are billions and billions of new devices waiting to be connected that will communicate with each other, work with each other, and make our lives easier in ways that we can't yet imagine.
TV off, lights off.
TV off, lights off.
It will allow you to control your energy consumption in your smart home. It will allow your fridge to decide when to order groceries for you and have them delivered by a self-driving truck. It will allow your dishwasher to decide when it needs to wash dishes, your laundry machine when it decides to wash clothes. So right now, we have to instruct our machines. But in a 5G world, our machines might decide to communicate directly to us or with each other. The machines will start communicating simply to regulate the flow of human activity. Your car is going to be connecting and thinking and interacting and communicating with every other sensor that happens as it's walking down the street. As it passes a building, as it passes somebody on a bicycle, information from a traffic light 3 blocks down that you can't even see yet. It's going to be completely seamless.
5G will enable all these devices to have super fast data connections. But we also need them to be stable connections, as one device hops rapidly between all of these antennae. How rapidly? Well, maybe this rapid.
This is the Millbrook 5G test bed. One of the things they're testing here is how well 5G antennae can follow a moving target. There's an antenna, and I'm the target.
I'm making a live video call to the computer trackside, which is actually really hard to do when you're moving at speed. At 140 miles an hour, each antenna can only send stuff to my special 5G hotspot in the car for about 4 seconds. And so here, each one has to form a beam which targets the car exactly, and then hands over the service seamlessly to the next antenna, all without interrupting the video stream. The kind of technology that Blue Wireless is testing here will eventually enable high-speed trains to stay connected to the 5G network and provide super-fast internet to their passengers.
To cover just this small area, they're using 11 antennae here. So if you want to blanket the whole UK with 5G, you are going to need a huge number of the things. I mean, this is a massive infrastructure rollout.
And the scale of all this is something being grappled with around the world. In the US, Verizon has stepped up its trials in US cities, albeit only over small areas. Speeds when it works are impressive, although the trials are said to have had some teething problems. Cities in South Korea and China could well get the first meaningful services. But what about if you're not in a city? Well, back in the UK, Jen Copestake has been looking at what 5G might mean for rural areas.
In this idyllic patch of British countryside, the birds are cheerfully singing and the cows are peacefully grazing. But look closer and you will see there is something very different about these cows, linking them to a unique experiment.
This dairy farm in Somerset is one of the first testbeds for 5G in the UK. The cows are wearing sensors and all of the data is being sent to the cloud and then back to the farmer who can make decisions based on this data.
Almost every task on this farm can be automated. These cows are queuing up patiently to be robotically milked. This system allows the cow to choose how many times a day and at what time it wants to be milked. The robot picks up on how much milk is coming from each of the cow's udders and can control the sensitivity of the milking as well. The cows here come and go as they please, with little human interaction in their movements.
So one of these cows is just taking itself for a massage.
The feeding system is also done by machine, and that's not all.
There's even a robot that scrapes up excrement, putting it into these channels, so it can quietly operate around the cows so as not to disturb them.
Duncan Forbes runs the farm. He's been working with Cisco on this project, which is part of the UK's 5G Rural First strategy. The farm was chosen to demonstrate how 5G would help bring together the many different points of data across a herd of cows. Low latency and the ability to cover large distances with 5G means the cows can be monitored in real time, even if they're grazing in the field.
What sensors is she wearing? Can we see any of them that are on her?
So on the collar, there's a little black square
Right.
that says Affy Milk Silent Herdsman on it. So that's one of the sensors, and it's an activity monitor.
Like a wearable that you'd wear like a
Yeah.
watch.
But the sort of thing it does is tells you when the cow's eating, because it's got an inclinometer, so when her head's down it says okay.
Yeah.
She's got the green one transponder underneath her chin,
Yeah.
and that's the one that controls the gates and so on inside
really?
the building. It's the electronic identity. The third one is just inside her ear. The little white button on the top of her ear is holding the
Oh, I see.
the sensor. So these cows have got more sensors than you would necessarily have on an ordinary herd because we're trying them out, we're testing them, and we're checking out their connectivity. Here we're on a dairy farm and we're using the technology to help us with our animals, but we're also going to have sensors around the fields telling us what the soil moisture is, what the temperature of the soil is, measuring the grass growth, using satellites or hyperspectral imaging to measure how much grass we've got, but also saying, well, maybe we don't need to use quite so much fertilizer.
5G could revolutionise the farming industry, connecting not just the UK farms, but farms around the world, so best practices can be compared and new techniques developed.
Imagine if you would be able to cross-correlate data, not only about how a cow is, if it's doing well, if it's sick within the farm, but across multiple farms, across multiple areas. Imagine the efficiency that you could get if you were able also to be able to manage the robots based on the best possible efficient way of doing it instead of just within a farm.
One of the biggest challenges for farming worldwide is the expected increase in world population, where we're going to need to produce 70% more food than we were producing in 2009 by 2050. That's a massive increase, and we've got to produce that food without additional impact on the environment, preferably less.
A byproduct of bringing the 5G network outside of cities could be a revolution in connection speeds for the countryside. A recent National Farmers Union survey showed only 17% of respondents reporting a reliable outdoor mobile signal, and only 16% saying they had access to super-fast broadband. The farmers here hope to make a strong economic case for bringing connectivity to all parts of the country, no matter how remote.
Hello and welcome to the Week in Tech. A drone has for the first time delivered a human organ. Surgeons in Maryland received a kidney to transplant from about 3 miles away. And Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg announced new measures to improve users' privacy as he laughed off his company's recent failures.
The strongest reputation on privacy right now to...
Updates include a friends feed free of adverts and an encrypted messenger service. Meanwhile, the UK government is preparing to plan new laws that will mean that all internet-connected devices need to have cybersecurity features built in. It proposes all devices sold in the UK come with unique passwords, state how long they will receive security updates for, and provide contact details to report vulnerabilities. We may have seen AI-generated faces before, but how about entire AI-generated people? Well, meet this lot. These photorealistic images by Japanese company Datagrid come complete with faces, hair, and even outfits. And finally, if you haven't worked up an appetite for lab-grown meat, then how about a spot of lab-grown fish? Singapore startup Shiok Meat won't be scrimping on the shrimps after raising $4.6 million to keep working on their cell-based delights. But are you ready to dive in?
To build a 5G network, you need a new type of telecoms gear. You need many more base stations, and they need to be smarter. It is the Chinese tech company Huawei which makes the most advanced 5G gear, but this has been making Western governments nervous. So I've come to find out, who are Huawei? It may look like Paris, but this is Huawei's brand new campus in Shenzhen, China. A huge site where employees take a train between office buildings, each of which is modelled on a different European city. Few journalists have visited this Disney World-like project, very much the brainchild of Ren Zhongfei, the company's founder. He's been compared to the likes of Steve Jobs, growing his company from a small workshop to a global tech giant, now employing 180,000 people. Huge spending on research means Huawei claim they're now around 18 months ahead of any other 5G manufacturer. And that includes not just getting faster and faster data speeds, but also dealing with the problems that come from higher performance.
So this is Huawei's 5G wireless base station. So normally in 5G, the power is around 1,000 watts.
And how much bigger is that than a 4G base station?
I think in 4G base station, normally the average power is 300 watts.
300. And
yeah.
this is...
So it's 3 times larger.
So this uses 3 times as much power?
Yeah.
So it gets hotter?
Yeah, it's much hotter.
It's a common problem in technology. As things get faster and they consume more power, they get hotter, and new cooling techniques need to be developed.
This is liquid cooling cycling.
Is that liquid boiling in there?
Yeah, it's bubble.
So that is boiling and then coming through this tube?
Yeah, it's boiling.
Right, okay.
Here, they're learning how different designs and materials can change the speed and direction that heated air flows away from the components. And here's an experiment to try and keep everything at a stable temperature by either applying heat or cold on demand.
Yeah, that's gone cold. Yeah, that's hot.
Huawei is currently enjoying huge success, with revenues last year in excess of $100 billion.
But this is also a company facing some serious issues.
The biggest is that the US is coming for Huawei in a big way.
Look, we have met the enemy, and it is Huawei, and it is China. Make no doubt about that. You know, right now, Lou, Huawei, through access to unlimited capital from the Chinese government, the communist government, all of this technology, guess what? It's built in for cyber spying, for cyber espionage, because that's what the Chinese do.
The problem is, Mr. Ren was once a member of China's People's Liberation Army. And that's raised suspicions about his links to the Chinese state and whether it and Huawei may have each other's backs. America is adamant that Huawei is a pawn of the Chinese authorities. In 2017, China passed the National Intelligence Law, which says that, if asked, all Chinese companies and citizens must help the government to assist national intelligence efforts. China claims this is part of an effort to safeguard its security. But the fear is that if Huawei supplies any country's 5G network, the Chinese could exploit it. To help the government decide whether Huawei should be in the UK's 5G network, the British security services have a special unit devoted to looking at the potential risks posed by Huawei. It's overseen by Dr. Ian Levy. His job is to defend the UK against digital attacks. He rarely gives interviews.
Does Huawei pose more of a security risk than the other companies that supply the network infrastructure?
So I think what we're talking about is assume the Chinese state wants to attack the UK telecoms networks. Our job is to try and make them work just as hard, regardless about whether we use Huawei kit or not.
Many people think the Chinese state would love to eavesdrop on other countries. So if we let Huawei into 5G, is that a real danger?
It's no more likely to have spying on communications in 5G than it is in 4G. And anything that's critical, whether it's government, business, even personal communications, should be encrypted. So, all of the communications with your bank from your smartphone, they're all encrypted because you don't want to trust the Wi-Fi and the telecoms network.
So if someone's listening on the line, they'll just get garbled.
They get gobbledygook, yep. And it's the same for critical stuff in business, in government, in control systems.
So, according to GCHQ, the threat of spying that we've heard so much about recently is overblown. But there is another threat that they take very seriously. In a future where our entire infrastructure, our economy, and our lives are run by computers talking to each other over a 5G network, what would happen if someone shut that network down?
If you think about it, the future of warfare is not necessarily going to be using traditional armies in the way that we think of, like with the Second World War. The future of warfare is most likely going to be cyber. So without firing a shot, you could take a country out.
It's feared that the Chinese state could order Huawei to build secret backdoors in a 5G network. These would leave the country vulnerable to a nationwide cyber attack. And that could be catastrophic. What we're about to show you is what experts have told us could happen if the UK's 5G network was attacked in the not too distant future.
I don't know. The station's been shut for nearly an hour. There's no information. No, there are no buses. Oh, it's a nightmare.
It looks like we're getting power surges.
I have no idea. They're just flicking so quickly.
Can't see anything the sector's having.
So tell me where the trouble is?
M11's completely stopped. The M1 and M4 are both backing up.
No accident.
Nothing.
You put me through to traffic police.
Hey, can you hear me? Oh, the traffic's gone crazy. Michelle, are you still there?
All major roads.
London's ground to a halt. I've got police and ambulances stuck everywhere. National Grid are going to shut things down. It's a total mess.
Within the last hour, BBC News has received hundreds of reports of widespread disruptions across the UK, with numerous services being affected.
I don't know, it's just flashing. I don't know what's going on, to be honest. It's just not driving.
Many roads are blocked after a variety of self-driving systems deactivated. The government is advising only to travel if absolutely necessary. Many shops have had to close due to being unable to take payments after the pay network went down. The ultimate cause of the disruption has yet to be confirmed.
Right, what's going on with the feeds? Can we get them back up again? Can we get the feeds back up?
They're offline.
We're also hearing that the smart grid has been overloaded and power supplies are being hit nationwide.
Like everyone is just turning all their appliances on and off randomly.
Guys, listen up. National Grid are going to shut down Midlands and the North, OK? That's going straight away.
Lights on. Lights on. Lights on.
TV on.
Time this is now being considered a national emergency. As soon as we receive any confirmation, we will, of course, share it.
This is a worst-case scenario, but it is possible. So, would Huawei deliberately expose their foreign customers to a Beijing-backed attack?
The
Chinese government explicitly requires all Chinese companies to strictly follow local laws in every country they operate in. The Chinese government has never and will never ask any Chinese enterprise to install backdoors. I can say with certainty that Huawei has never installed backdoors in its equipment in the past, and neither will we do such a thing in the future.
But the latest GCHQ-backed report published in March found that there are security holes in Huawei's equipment.
What was the overall result of your report into Huawei?
The security engineering at Huawei is unlike anything else. It's engineering like it's back in the year 2000. It's very, very shoddy and leads to cybersecurity issues that we then need to manage long term.
Do you have any evidence that the vulnerabilities that are in Huawei's products were put there deliberately?
We do specifically say in there that we don't believe the things we're reporting on are the evidence of Chinese state malfeasance.
So it's just bad engineering?
It's poor engineering.
Poor engineering and bad software practices come in many guises, including incorporating other companies' code, which itself isn't safe.
The reason you have to be so sure of what's in a build of software, if it's called, all the components that go into the software, is precisely because these days a lot of that software is from third parties. So you need to be sure that when you buy your bit of equipment that's running a bit of software, the person that's built that software for you has done their due diligence and they know precisely what they've put in and checked that it is secure.
And the problem is, however these vulnerabilities get into a network, whether deliberately or because of bad engineering practices, they can still be used to attack it. Huawei don't deny that there are problems with their security, and they've told us that they'll release more detailed plans on how they'll address them early in the summer. You don't need to spend a lot of time in China to see that the power is definitely shifting. Just a few decades ago, Shenzhen was a fishing village. Today, it's a megalopolis of around 13 million people, home to China's tech revolution and transformed by China's ability to push things through without consultation with its citizens or its companies. Within the last year, every single taxi and bus in this enormous city has gone electric. This just one result of China's ability to push things through. While the UK has been anguishing over HS2, thousands of miles of high-speed rail have been built linking Shenzhen with other cities across the country. So it's clear the Chinese are making massive strides in high tech. We're being told that in 10 years' time we might regret letting Huawei in. But conversely, in 10 years' time, might we regret not riding the wave with them? After all, I think it's fair to say that China's time has come.